Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the podcast. Best way you can do that is by becoming a paid subscriber. I do a weekly analysis and commentary and audio, video, and written format that people get access to through the Substack. And I organize Zoom chats with subscribers where we shoot the breeze off the record, discussing world events. You could donate, purchase a console if you want to chat with me. Check out my affiliates, leave a podcast review. And joining us for the first time is Allan Paul Roberts. He's an author dedicated to exposing the globalist agenda to collapse society and usher in the new world order. He's got a fantastic new book called The Globalist Plan to collapse everything to usher in a new world order. In their own words, he reveals this strategy with compelling detail, directly citing key players, and he uses an innovative writing approach featuring QR codes and creates an interactive multimedia experience that deepens readers' understanding of complex topics. You can check out the book at globalcollapsebook.com, as well as authorroberts.com, and he's on X as well. Links are all in the description. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Allan.
So glad to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I told you earlier, I kept confusing your name with Paul Craig Roberts, but he's been a frequent guest on the podcast. But I wanted to start, something you wrote initially in the start of your book. Let me just read this quote, and it kind of resonated with me, right? Why this book, you might ask? Are there not countless books, videos, and podcasts concerning the globalists and their clandestine plans? Are there not dozens, even hundreds of popular alternative media pundits shouting dire warnings from the rooftops? Is there not a great awakening underway, not only on social media, but also among highly influential voices exposing the growing list of existential threats facing America and the entire Western world? Those are the questions I asked myself after the concept for this book came to me one Saturday morning in the form of 6 points. Once in a while, I sense what you might call a God nudge to help someone or to say something kind. I thought, Lord, do you want me to write a book? And if I were to write a book, what would the title be? The title came before I could complete the question. It was there in a flash, as instantly as it had appeared on a TV screen. And so at the most basic level, that's why this book, end quote. And it's funny because I constantly ask myself this exact same question on why and whether I should write a book, given that there's so much stuff out there. But I think it's good that you did. I would like to. I'm just waiting for my God nudge moment. So just before getting into the meat of your book, any further thought on what spurred you to write this book?
Well, sure. What spurred me to write it was an event that happened to me in late late April of 2024. I think it was the last Saturday in April. I woke up around 4 a.m. and was, getting ready to get up and go to the bathroom, just typical waking up in the middle of the night, nothing special. But before I got out of bed, I had this, the most intense experience of my life, I would say. What happened was I perceived 6 different collapse points. This was America under attack in 6 particular points that were under attack and in danger of falling. And what was unique about the experience was that I was able to perceive all 6 simultaneously with complete clarity, all at the same time without being distracted by the other 5. So that was just kind of like a mind-blowing experience for me. So I got up. I keep paper in the bathroom, in the drawers in the bathroom. I pulled out some paper and wrote those 6 collapse points down because I was surprised and kind of shocked, but just really kind of taken aback. And I thought, well, I want to get back to bed. It's around 4 a.m, but I don't want to forget. So I'll write them down so I can think about them later. And I went back to bed. I'm laying there for 3 or 4 minutes, and 3 more collapse points came in exactly the same way. Just great intensity all at once, perceiving all 3 at one time. And I got up and wrote those down. So now I have 9 bouncing around in my head, and I'm trying to get back to sleep, which is almost impossible at that point. And 2 more came. So I practically jump out of bed at that point. write them down, and now I'm in this state of what the heck is going on, and as I've mentioned to some people in the past, who have asked me about this, I say, look, my frame of reference is I am a prayerful person. I start every day with at least 30 minutes of prayer and meditation, and sometimes significantly more than that. But my routine is to have that quiet prayer time to kind of just try to sense God's will for my day and what I can do. But it's at most just like a sense. It's not like you were talking about what I'd mentioned, the God nudge. God put a thought comes into your mind to help somebody, so you think, yeah, where'd that come from? Maybe that's God, pushing me to do that. So you try to do it. Or like maybe you need to make amends with somebody that you got into an argument with. Just little things. But this was like so intense. But because my framework was, hey, I start my day with prayer, I felt like it had to be God that was revealing this to me. And so in that moment, just in my mind, I just said, God, why are you showing me this? Do you want me to write a book or something? And if you did want me to write a book, what would the title be? And as you were reading, just as I was thinking that thought, the full title and the subtitle came all in one flash. And so I took that to be an affirmation that he wanted me to write a book about those 11 collapse points. And so I didn't hesitate. I took it as a direction to do that, and didn't go back to bed. Went downstairs, made some coffee. An hour and a half later, my wife comes down. I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened to me." Explained the whole thing. She's like, "I completely believe it. When do you want to get started? How do you want to do it? Go to the beach, go to the mountains, whatever, get away for a while." And so I went to the beach, booked 8 nights at the beach, and researched and wrote from morning till night. Went out for breakfast, went out for dinner. Other than that, I was researching and just getting started. And then I dedicated every single weekend, the whole weekend, from like mid-May when we went on the trip through the end of August, and lots of nights and stealing time during the day when I could. So it was super intense. My wife said, "Hey, do you realize you gave up your whole summer for this?" And I hadn't even thought of it that way. It's like I just wanted to do it, and so that's how it happened. Just about 300 pages in 3.5 months.
And a few 2 points interesting there for me, your God nudge thing. I've also been led by that. As you say, for me, it manifests as a gut feeling. So every time that I had to make a big decision, like when I went off to live in Mongolia or decided to study in Switzerland or got a job in Mexico or Kazakhstan, and it's kind of like you have this certainty, this gut feeling in you that's pushing you, or this podcast, that's pushing you to take that step and says, okay, I got to do this. And also notes, I'm not much of I don't do journaling. I'm bad with notes, but I've read so many experts, and you sort of gave a good example. We get really good ideas. And I'll have moments like yours where I get these words. I'm thinking of something, and I'm thinking of what I would post or say. And if I don't write it down, it goes. And when I try to rethink, the first time it comes to my mind, it's very well. It's a phrase that's really high quality, but then I can't get it back. So let this be a lesson also for listeners that. We should have a system of taking notes. And so, many listeners will be familiar with the New World Order, but from your vantage point, and this is what I try to do on the podcast, is there's people who come from a multitude of backgrounds from the U.S., from different countries, different languages, different cultures, different spiritual, religious perspectives. And I think each has a unique vantage point where they can offer us views that some might be, perspectives that might be new to us. And so maybe just to start, what in the world is going on with this New World Order?
Oh, well, yeah, it's such a big topic. And, it's one of these things where it's almost like the layers of an onion that you can just keep peeling back and peeling back. This has been going on for decades. Some would argue centuries. the Freemasons are ultimately behind the big picture, but everything about the New World Order, no matter which way you approach it, if you dig deep enough, you find that the same goals keep repeating themselves over and over, no matter which secret society you're investigating. And ultimately, it's to have a one world government with a world leader, a dictator in charge of it. And so that's the common theme. But it reveals itself in different ways. As simple as the World Economic Forum stating, it's 2030, you own nothing, and you'll be happy. Okay, we'll own nothing. That's a common thing. It's the abolition of property rights, the pretty much the destruction of the family unit, the abolition of private property, the end of all religion except for a Luciferian religion. These themes go back quite a ways, and they're hard to. There's a chapter in the book where I'm saying, can they really pull this off? Because it sounds so far-fetched. It sounds like James Bond movie, evil villain, the bald guy with the cat, the mini-me, whatever it might be. It just conjures up like this crazy, far-fetched concept that you think couldn't possibly happen. And, you don't have to look very far back in history to find tyrants who wanted to rule the world. I mean, just go back to Hitler. That wasn't that long ago in terms of human lifetimes. And, it really comes down to human nature. There's going to be sociopaths, psychopaths, whatever you want to call them, who have no issue with causing human suffering if they can get their way. And so what I like to say is, has human society gotten better in such a way that we would be less likely to have that type of person emerge? Have people gotten less greedy or more greedy? And the big thing, has technology made it easier or harder to manipulate people and to gain power over them? And we know the answer to that. Technology has multiplied the ability to gain control over others. We see it with how our privacy is violated, email communications, cell phone tracking, cameras on every corner. So you have that. You have the potential control of the financial system, where your financial records can be monitored. In China, you have a social credit score system already, where your not only your actions but your financial activities, your social media activity is monitored, and your freedoms are impacted directly by that. So we're in a place where the technology makes it much easier to happen, and I don't think human nature has changed. I mean, from the time of the Bible and earlier probably, but the lessons in the Bible are common for all generations, which is why they ring so true. And so they can pull it off because of how their power is concentrated and how they can leverage it through technology.
Yeah, you mentioned Luciferian religion, and again, particularly for the folks who eschew the Bible. I was recently a guest on Courtney Turner's podcast yesterday. She's been on the podcast as well. And again, I was in Geneva studying, and I have the actual document, Arcane School, Lucis Trust, Lucifer Publishing, and it talks about how Lucifer is a good guy. He's Prometheus. He's here to help us. And I mean, it's not a joke. And they work with the UN, which is the world government.
Yes.
And they, I was
I was only chuckling because he's here to help us. I mean, we know that's a great one. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
But because some people who listen who eschew the Bible and they think, oh, it's just wacky Christians, but it's like, look, I've been to their meeting. They actually believe this stuff, and they are linked to the international organizations. And the second point you made, we'll talk about this more, but the social credit system. I've interviewed foreigners who live in China, and they, I think I don't view China necessarily as an enemy, but when we talk about the social credit system, they tell me it doesn't exist. Or if I keep pressing on them, they say, okay, it does exist, but it's a great thing. It keeps everyone behaving well. And then, just the other day, I just published this April 1st, this year. Chinese official government website of China, the State Council Information Office, the People's Republic of China, they publish China unveils guideline to improve social credit system. But then you talk to these pundits who are cheerleaders for China and say it doesn't exist. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. I like how your book is short, it's concise, and it's formatted, especially, for people new to the information, old or new, can readily digest it. And so you have your chapter on the globalist endgame. And I'm just going to list off the headings. We can't cover everything, of course, is why people should get the book. But you talk about, again, world government, end of bodily autonomy, social credit system, programmable digital world currency, 15-minute cities and travel restrictions, enforced climate lockdowns, criminalizing religious speech and other forms of speech, and massive population reduction. And again, what I like about your work is that what I just read out there from the headings from that chapter, that's what I mostly focus on the podcast. That's what I consider are the most important themes of our day. And many of us are beginning to feel these walls closing in. We're being deplatformed. We're being restricted in travel. I live in the 15-minute city. I was shocked to discover this a few years ago. Wow. They're bringing on new travel restrictions now. To travel anywhere, you're going to need an electronic travel authorization, which is based on your social credit. So they're going to check your profile. So before you go to the UK or EU, now in the US also, they're going to look at your social media, and if they don't like the way that you think, they will deny your travel authorization, where even if you have a valid passport and a valid visa to travel to the UK or EU, they will say, no, you cannot come. And so just further thoughts on some of these issues. For me, the biggest concern, again, is this social credit system in the West where we are. Yes, it does exist. It's not as evident. Yes, it's in China, despite what some of the cheerleaders say. Maybe it's not as evident, but what would you call me being deplatformed from Patreon and PayPal, if not a social credit system? And we just see them advancing. Like, I'm here in Mexico. They just keep announcing city after city, state after state is becoming a 15-minute city in Mexico here. So just your further thoughts on some of these agendas.
Yeah, it really is amazing how worldwide this thing is, which proves that, it's a top-down thing that's controlled at a very high level. I think along the lines of what you're talking about with that social credit score and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. I mean, in the UK, it's kind of horrifying. You've probably heard about these people that are silently praying, a couple hundred yards from an abortion clinic, silently praying. And the police come up, and it's on video. The police come up, what are you praying about? We want to know what you're praying. And if you answer, I'm praying for, the people going through these abortions, or I'm praying for the babies, they can haul you off, literally haul you off. And even if your house is within a certain perimeter, you're not allowed to silently pray in your own home in the UK. It's illegal. I mean, you wouldn't think this would be possible, but the level of tyranny that's unfolding is shocking to me. And you can see how as you said, the noose is tightening. In the U.S., at least for the moment, we're fortunate that with Donald Trump in there, he's very aware of this, it appears, because he's pushing back on almost every tenet of it. But you can see how fragile it is because, just a year ago, our border was wide open. Nobody's being vetted, and people, even today in our blue cities, people can steal $1,000 per store, and they don't go to jail. Nobody arrests them. It's a free for all. It's chaos. It's planned chaos. And but as far as it tying into a social credit score, I mean, just the whole January 6th event, where they scooped up phone records and basically used that to identify everybody who had been in the area. And then many of them were thrown into prison, with no trial, and held there for 4 years until they were pardoned. So you can see the tyranny and the use of technology, and disregarding the Constitution. I mean, in the U.S., there's a right to a fair and speedy trial of your peers, and they got none of that. So, yeah.
And maybe to ask you on the population reduction aspect. I mean, it's as clear as day. I mean, you mentioned Georgia Guidestones, which have since been blown up mysteriously, right, but we can read ad nauseum, again, for the normies who mock us. I mean, Kissinger's memorandum, authors like Jacques Attali, Bertrand Russell, I can't remember the Huxleys. Ad nauseum, they speak. I was reading a book from the 1970s called Warren Wager. He's an academic, openly saying we must decrease the population. What are your thoughts? I believe the event of the 2020s was one great advance in that direction. Shockingly, I just read, I'm trying to pull it up here, the WHO just ran a simulation called Exercise Polaris. So it's like, are they planning something again? But in your book, you also mentioned we've got GMOs, we got geoengineering. They're attacking the food supply, and so all these, it's 1,000 death by 1,000 cuts. So your further thought on this eugenicist? You got euthanasia, which you cover as well. In Canada, they're now bringing online these MAID programs and lowering the limits. So, teenagers, you feel depressed? Hey, come into this building. I'll help you off yourself. And so, your thoughts on that, and how successful you think they'll be? How much do you think if the success they'll have, and how low can they bring the population? Wars as well, right?
Sure. Well, I think it's getting harder in some ways for them to get people to willingly go along. Now, there's still people getting their 8th COVID booster. There's very few, but, as a percent, less and less as people's eyes are open more and more. But I mean, if the whole COVID crisis and the way it was handled is not proof of an intent to reduce world population, I don't know what is. I mean, I get it. The normies they're not up on any of this, but for people who are up on it, that's really all the proof anyone would need, because I mean, the studies that have been done, if you can get your hands on them, but the studies that have been done show, the effect of all-cause mortality, how it follows along with the shots, and especially with the boosters that came afterward. And the book goes into one of those studies in Australia. I actually have the chart from it here. It's going to be hard to see on the screen. I'm going to hold it up. But that orange line is all-cause mortality. And I'm sorry, the black line is all-cause mortality. The orange line is the boosters. And you can see how they track. The shapes of the curves are the same. But all-cause mortality really spikes as more and more boosters go out over time. But they mirror each other. So, for so long, they were trying to say that it was caused by other things. But the all-cause mortality is pretty much an ironclad thing. It follows the shots. It follows the boosters. And so as people become more aware, then in order to get their way with their plans, they have to be more and more nefarious. They have to hide it, or they have to force it and give you no choice. And that's what I'm concerned about, is will a level of tyranny grow in that area as it has with what you're describing as the 15-minute cities, where it just keeps branching out, kind of under its own power, regardless of what people want. It just keeps moving forward because they have the means to make it move forward. And we can get into maybe later into the banking system, but that's one area that really concerns me, because they can force a banking collapse if they just don't like the way something's going in a country, they can pull the ultimate nuclear option, and take down the whole economy and cause utter chaos if they really want to. I'm kind of holding my breath on that one.
Yeah, before getting to that, that was in my talk, my notes for you. You have your collapse section, and I think that's was that the 11 points, and obviously we can't cover that all, and I've highlighted a few, but
right.
Before getting to that, you have a summary where I know Jeremy Ryan Slate asked you this when you were on his podcast the day, who's running the show. Ultimately, I think it's a black box. For me, it's people know my view. I think it's Satan. Mark Passio calls it the occulttocracy, the technocratic. So I think it's an occult combination of many different factions. I mean, you mentioned Freemasonry, it's banking, it's elite families, it's a large swath of folks that are pulled together to this ideology. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, it's this supernatural being, this angel, Lucifer, that's at the top of the pyramid. But you list in your book what I like, what's visible for us. Of course, the United Nations, the founders were influenced by, Luciferian theosophy. They were theosophists. They were Freemasons. So on and so forth. You mentioned WEF, the WHO, which is running this latest exercise on how to implement this global totalitarianism, the Bretton Woods system, right? And then I like what you also add in, three-letter spy agencies, many world leaders, obviously, governors, big city mayors, military heads, many in the House and state. And just on the Mexico example, like for me, it was really to learn that, I'm in Mexico, in some state in Mexico. And, when a lot of folks talk about the New World Order, they're focusing on the US or the Europe, and not these small little countries. And the governor of my state, I can identify clear links of his connection to the New World Order. How we've got the Rockefeller, I found the documents, the Rockefeller Foundation is financing the development of the infrastructure of where I live. It's called a resilient city, which is a synonym for a 15-minute city. So You've got a Rockefeller Foundation giving money to my governor in my state here in Mexico. So the governor, the mayor is in on it. So they're working with all of these agencies, this infrastructure. BlackRock is here, UN agencies, NGOs, you name it. So just your thought on who's running the ship.
Yeah. I heard a good explanation recently, and honestly, I don't remember who said it. But the reason you can't put your finger on it is because it's everybody working in concert. It's a bunch of people working in concert. So, somebody will say, it's the CCP or it's this or it's that, and they're all right. But it's just that it's not one thing. You can't put your finger on one thing. And so what I say is, look to their actions, just like Jesus said, a bad tree can't bear good fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit. Look at the fruit of the tree, which is basically look at their actions, not what they say, but what they do. So all the tyrannical things that they do, if you can tie them back to any one of the 11 collapse points in the book, to me, that's the proof. So, yes, it is the, one world banking system, the 12 banking families, all the central banks. That's one very important player, but it's also, the World Health Organization, the various UN agencies. They all, if you really look at what they do, look at those actions. I mean, the actions where they want to, the UN, the World Health Organization, wants to be the final word on what the protocol has to be whenever there's a pandemic. And they want the unilateral ability to declare a pandemic and then to force every member of the World Health Organization, all those countries, to follow their guidelines. And if they say we need a shutdown, then every economy needs to shut down. That's what they want. So it's things like that. It's those actions. Who's voting for the 15-minute cities? Who's promoting that? they're all globalists, because all these actions contribute toward their goal of global control, one world government with one person in charge of everything.
And nobody's voting for this stuff. Like,
No.
again, I'm just using my example from my vantage point. Again, I'm here in Mexico, and no one voted for Guadalajara, where I am, becoming a resilient city. Like, no one even knows what that is. You ask any Mexican here, like, what's a resilient city? Ciudad Resiliente. It's like, and no one voted for it. They just impose it. Another state, Sonora, just made a deal with Foxconn to convert its capital into a smart city. It's like, nobody voted for that. We didn't have to do vehicle emissions until 2 years ago. Nobody voted for that. The government just came in with this, as you explained, this new world order infrastructure in the background, coming in and telling the Mexican government, giving them, here's the policies you guys are going to implement. And the Mexican governor and president and mayor is like, okay, now we got to do vehicle emissions, everyone. And if your car doesn't pass the test, your car is illegal. So now you can't get around. And then moving to the collapse section, you talk about borders, law and order, security, police, privacy, banking and finance, education, energy, environment, GMO, geoengineering, medical systems, food supply, self-identity, and faith. And actually, the first section I had highlighted was banking and finance. And you mentioned, funnily enough, you have quotes in there at the start. You mentioned Ed Dowd. And it's funny, I haven't interviewed him yet, but 2 years ago, I was at the American Freedom Alliance, and I just happened to grab this cup for my coffee this morning. And I sat at the same table to have dinner with him. I never get to speak with him because I was talking at length with Joe Allen. So I technically had dinner with Ed Dowd, but I haven't spoken to him yet. But the banking and finance, I think that's one of the big ones, which you just brought up, because everything that's going on now with the tariff war, this war that's going on. It's and that's where they will get us, grab us by. I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying it, but like in my banking apps, I've been saying they already have the carbon footprint tracker in my banking app. I've been unable to renew my debit card because now they only want me to do it with my Mexican National Digital ID, which is the voter ID, which I don't have, so I can't renew my banking card. And if they collapse everything, they can just they'll say, okay, we got this problem. The solution is digital IDs, digital currencies. Just what are your thoughts when it comes to this space?
Yeah, that's probably the one that concerns me the most, because they, as I said earlier, they do have the power to just force it to happen. I've been concerned for a long time, especially after doing the research, even more concerned with just the fragility of the banking system and how they would have a perfect excuse to bring it all down because of in the U.S. and I imagine a lot of other places in the world, how they have manipulated the interest rates over time and made them extremely low for like a decade at least or more, near zero, and then within the last couple of years in the U.S. raised them to 5%. And so you have all these banks that were holding treasury notes and treasury bills at near zero, at low percentage rates, let's say 1 or 2% even. And now the new ones are paying, let's say 5%. And so their 2 or 2.5% treasury notes are worth literally half what they were, just a year before. And so these banks are underwater in their asset holdings, and it wouldn't take much of a nudge in terms of some kind of bank run for it to all come crashing down very quick. I mean, we saw Silicon Valley Bank and 2 other major banks go under, and those banks alone added up to a bigger default than the 20-some banks that went under during the 2008 crisis, financial crisis. So you just see how fragile it is, and then our FDIC has the ability to back 1% roughly, or some say less than 1% of all the loans. So they say, yeah, you're good up to 250,000, but that's only up until 1% of the banks fail, because then they'll just the bailing out those loans will exhaust their funds. So. Yeah, I'm just concerned about that level of control that they have to just tip the scale and get us off to the races very quickly, forcing the next step, which could be, of course, the central bank digital currency, which is then a setup for eventually the one world digital currency mark of the beast nightmare scenario, that the Bible and Revelation says is coming at some point. But it's just like, how long can we hold that off? I hope a long time, but it feels very fragile to me.
Any thought on what the one world currency would look like? Because I think the dollar is as close to a one world currency as we have, because it's the world reserve currency. Many nations, like even in Latin America, use it as their national currency. But of course, you had Keynes in the 1940s talk about the Bancor, which was a prototype of a one world currency. There's people now talking again about attempting to bring about the Bancor. People like Jim Rickards have talked about the IMF special drawing right. And it's funny, people have pointed out, if you look at the U.S. Postal, if you go to the U.S. Postal Service, their website, airplane tickets, I was shocked to discover, how many of these services will talk about liabilities, like if the flight is canceled or your package is lost, they calculate, how much they would insure, or give you back money for the value of your package or plane ticket. And they'll put a dollar amount, but there's also an amount that's calculated in IMF special drawing rights, which is quite shocking. It's like, well, it's already there. It's like they're already preparing for the rollout of IMF SDRs. And then there's BRICS, they're talking, and there's this general talk of a third iteration of Bretton Woods and the third world government 3.0, League of Nations, UN, and whatever will be this third iteration. I can see BRICS as becoming that third version, or just being added on like a Frankenstein beast to whatever this third version is. Just any thought on what, they've talked about interoperable CBDCs. So it might not just be some obvious one currency, but they just create this sort of mesh decentralized system. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, in the book, there is a link to a video where his name is Augustin Carstens of the Bank for International Settlements, openly talks about, with kind of like a shocking calmness, as if this isn't like a tragedy unfolding, but he talks about the power of a central bank digital currency, and because he's at kind of like the top of the world pyramid of banking with the Bank for International Settlements, which is basically a bank that the central banks work with to kind of organize and clear money. And so that's at a higher level, is my understanding, than any central bank. And he's talking about it. So I would think that it would kind of flow down possibly from the Bank for International Settlements or the World Bank or something at that level at some point. So I think these things tend to gradually roll out over time. So just as we have, the European Union, and we were supposed to have a North American Union at one time, where you have these big regional global blocks, and then eventually you rolled them up into a one world system. I think the same is true with these central bank digital currencies. You could have several of them as a precursor to rolling them up into one. I mean, they tend to be very patient and methodical with these things. They don't just do this on a whim and then roll it out in 5 years. It's a gradual tightening of the noose, a gradual gathering of control, the way I see it. And so, I would think in the end, it'll just all roll out to something. And as you said, we may have several CBDCs or regional CBDCs by, North America, South America. It might be that kind of level, or something similar to that. But eventually, I believe it's just going to roll up into one, and so that you can have the ultimate control that they're looking for.
You see, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. I just got a completely new insight right there in the way you compared it to the regional unions. And that makes perfect sense, because for European Union now, they have one currency for all 30 states, the euro. Right. And then you have the plan for the Amero. So if you have 10 regional political systems, you're only, at the end of the day, we're going to drop from hundreds of currencies to 10, like a dozen currencies, and they're all going to be digital, and they might as well sort of link up in the style of IMF special drawing rights, which is, it's kind of like a basket of currencies. And so that makes logical sense. Another one, I guess your next collapse point that was most interesting for me is energy. That would be your sixth collapse point, because again, these are the key nodes of control. We talk about banking now, right? Energy. And I've had on some energy experts from across the spectrum: Gail Fairberg, Steve St. Angelo. I can't remember them all. Ugo Bardi, I should get him back on. He's actually linked to the Club of Rome. So I try to talk to, when if I can, I try to get globalists on themselves to, talk to me. But you talk about affordable energy and how obviously they're now attacking affordable energy. I'm just wondering what you think the game is here, because do you think, I'm still, I think these are some important questions we have to ask to really understand what's really going on. How unlimited is our energy sources? They've talked about peak oil in the 50s. Hubbard came up with that, but he was linked to the elites. And so it's like, I view oil as abiotic. I think from a biblical perspective, it just makes sense that it's something that renews from within the earth. But then the question is, how fast does it renew? And so what do you think the game plan is here? And are they shooting themselves in the foot? Because now they're realizing to carry out this algorithm ghetto, this technocracy, they need a massive amount of energy for the AI data centers. And so it's like they've been pushing wind and solar. And my kind of thinking is they want to give us, the plebes, this intermittent poor source of energy, solar panels and wind, while they get the hydrocarbons for themselves and the data centers. Just your thoughts on energy.
I totally agree that they'll keep the good, reliable, robust power for themselves and push us down, if they can, into the very weak, hard to renew sources of power, wind and solar. And I think this ties into your comment about the 15-minute cities. The 15-minute cities are really about restricting travel rights in the end. They're, because they want everything to be within a 15-minute walking or biking distance, let's say. Everything you need is there. Therefore, you don't need to go outside of that. Therefore, you may not be allowed to go outside of that, or very seldom go outside of it. And electric power, if you have only electric cars, it's easy to restrict the range, especially if we limit how much electricity you get, where you can only afford to power up your car periodically, and just the range on electric cars in general is much less, and obviously it takes a long time to recharge them to go long distances compared to the internal combustion engine. But I agree that they'll always keep the best things for themselves. But in the end, I think it's all part of the plan to limit us and control us, and to the ability, for example, to limit the power coming into your home. If you have natural gas or something that is storable, whether even if it were wood heat or pellet stoves or propane fuel, something storable. They don't want. They want something they can turn off at the flick of a switch, which is electricity. And so I think, that's why they're trying to phase out, gas stoves. You can imagine a builder isn't going to want to build a house that's powered by gas if you can't have your gas stove, if you can't have your gas hot water heater. What's the point in giving you a gas home, right? So, I think it all comes down to control. So just think of what would give you the most freedom and the most security, and they're probably going to do the opposite almost every time.
What, I don't want to keep, I guess maybe to ask you, in terms of some of the endgame points or collapse points, what are for you some of the key ones that sort of keep you up at night?
Well, a couple things. Definitely the financial system, which we've talked about. That's the one, because I perceive that as the most fragile, and so I encourage people to have cash on hand. I encourage people to convert their assets into hard assets wherever they can, and by that I mean, gold or silver. If you're lucky enough to have an IRA that amounts to anything, I'm not a financial advisor, but to me, it would be smart to convert that into a metals IRA that's stored in a secure location, as opposed to having an IRA that's just dollar based, for example. So that keeps me up at night. I mean, although at this point I'm kind of like, I'm just trying to do my best to get the word out there, and honestly, nothing really keeps me up, but I do think about it a lot. But the food supply is a concern. That's a big one. In the book, it goes through a chapter where it has, I think it's 39 events in 2021, 2022, where food plants are burned down and/or chickens and livestock are intentionally destroyed because some fake PCR test decided that they had a symptom that was not visible to the human eye, and therefore we must call the entire herd. 39 events like that. And some of them were up to like 5 million birds slaughtered at one time. So that concerns me a lot. Those are probably the two biggest ones. And then, of course, I'm really concerned. I know some people were very confident in Trump's move with all these tariffs, and I get it to a certain point. We have to become independent of countries that would manipulate us in terms of cutting off our supply. But at the same time, I think we're on like a razor's edge here with China. I could see them, cutting off all shipments. For example, if it really got bad, they'd just say, "Fine, we're not going to ship anything to you. See how long you can last," like almost like a siege mentality. So that one probably concerns me the most right now. Like is just the situation with these tariffs, for the potential for it to really go sideways.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the food supply. That was my third sort of highlighted, which I thought was important. There's a guy I follow on, I think he's French. I follow him on X. He's really good. And he points out that all of these Soylent Green fake meat companies are failing, which, I mean, at least that's some good news, because no one is buying it. And I think that, that's one of the solutions is, I think you mentioned that in your book as well. Just pull your money away from these companies to get them to fail. So that's good news. And I recently came across the establishment. I was on some of their websites, these mainstream institutions, and they're talking about agro terrorism. How convenient, right? We had 2020 COVID, biosecurity, bioterrorism, and now it's agro terrorism. And their solution again is just more control, surveillance of the food supply, right? It's kind of, and it links to what you're saying. And then let me, and then I guess to ask you then, what do we do in terms of trying to fight back? You talk about in that section coping, which I think is good, and becoming watchful and mentally resilient. Sometimes people who listen, there's a portion of people who call me black-pilled, and I'm like, that doesn't even enter into my thinking or vocabulary. All I'm doing is like a soldier would in a war who's doing reconnaissance or analysis of the war. What is the realistic situation on the battlefield? So I think that's kind of like what you did with your book, what I do with the podcast. Does anyone call the soldier or the general black-pilled? No. It's kind of like you're just making an accurate analysis of the lay of the land. If you don't like it, too bad. And so sometimes people have a difficult time coping because it's fearful. And I go back again to the Bible. How many times does Jesus say, "Don't be fearful, don't be afraid"? And there are podcasters that are hyper alarmist. And I think we have to stay away from people who try to get you to freak out. We have to keep calm and carry on. Okay. So number one, as you say in your book, and to be resilient mentally. To develop, I don't know, the muscles in your mind
Yes.
to be able to sift through this information without going crazy. And maybe for some people, they can't handle it. It's better off they take it in small bites. But just your thoughts on what to do in this respect.
Yeah, well, I think the ultimate resiliency comes from an attitude of faith. It comes from true faith that we're not alone. That there's a God who cares about us, loves us, and wants to help us, and is there to help us as we call upon Him. So, for me personally, I don't think I would be able to be truly mentally resilient if I didn't have faith as an anchor. And so I would, in the book, I actually try to bring people to, to take the time to reach out to God and to get solid in that area of your life, solid spiritually, so that you have a frame of reference and an anchor, and so you don't get so rattled by things when they happen. But then the second thing, and it goes over it in the book, is to anticipate possible next moves in each of these areas. So if we can get to the place where, okay, we are not in denial about what's going on. And if you're not in denial, then the next step is to think, okay, what might they do next in each of these 11 areas of collapse, of intended collapse? And so I run through that, like possibilities, things they might do, because if you can imagine what they might do, you kind of have prepared yourself. You've thought through that so that if it were to happen, the shock value and the ability to cause fear and disorientation is reduced a great deal. So that's the second thing is to anticipate. And then the third thing is to take some steps to prepare, create your own insurance policy, have some, backup food, storable food, have some cash on hand, like we were saying. Recently, speaking of cash on hand, with the natural disasters that happened in the U.S., North Carolina, when all that came through and wiped out, these floods wiped out whole towns and the electrical power was out, the only people that had any purchasing power were the ones that had cash. So, if there's a bank bail-in and the banks take your money, which is legal in the U.S., they can, if they are under threat of collapsing since 2008 and the way the laws have been rewritten, the banking laws, they can legally take your money and give you the equivalent in bank stock for that. So, you have 10 grand, that bank collapses, it takes your 10 grand and gives you 10 grand worth of worthless bank stock. And what are you going to do? Now you have no purchasing power. So, that's a thing. And even when it comes to self-defense, I mean, I don't like to go there, but think about self-defense and what's legal in your area. If you're allowed to own a handgun or something, and you have that as your backup, because if things spin out of control, then people get irrational and law and order decays. And it's already decaying in the blue cities in the U.S. And I know in Mexico you deal with that in a lot of ways. But you have to think outside the box and get away from the normalcy bias that the future is going to look like the past, because there's no guarantee of that. But we have to be prepared. And then the other thing is not to look so much inward out of fear, but to look, how can I help others? How can I help not only my family? How can I help my friends? And then take it to the next step. How can I help my local community? So maybe you have resources to help them. And you don't look at it as just, I have to defend what I have. It has to be outward. And that act of like just being outward of wanting to help others is very freeing. And that helps you overcome fear. I've found I try not to think about myself so much. I try to resist that goal, or resist that urge to focus on that internally and just push it outward. How can I help? How can I make a difference? And that's very freeing.
Don't think outside the box. Stand on the box, smash it, set it on fire. That's one of my recent guests on the Spanish edition of Geopolitics and Empire, Geopolitics and Empire, en español, with I think it was Ramiro Medina Flores of We Are Not Zombies. They're based in Mexico City. That's what he was saying. Smash the box. And just on your point, and this is what I try to do. They can't really surprise us anymore. It's gotten so bad, so boring. They're following this script that we're familiar with, that you lay out in your book, that they've talked about for centuries. They've got it all mapped out. We can read their maps. I demand better psyops. Here's just the news today, and the news today in UK. It says, like, many of us following this have been aware for years. Like, and you talk about this in your book. They collapse the borders. They allow illegal migrants to come in intentionally. So they're creating the problem. And what's the solution now? It says more than 40 Labour MPs from 3 influential backbench groups have called on ministers to introduce digital IDs, which they claim would boost productivity in delivering public services and crack down on illegal employment. And I think they also talk about illegal stuff like that, migration. And so, like, it's once we we don't have to be afraid. It's like, oh yeah, of course we knew they were going to do that, and so that kind of it makes you feel more reassured. And your plan, again, your chapter on physical preparation is an excellent chapter with excellent blueprint. I like how you cite Proverbs 27:12. A prudent man sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. And so, yeah, maybe just any further thoughts on, well, I guess we covered that. I think the point that you made, and many guests, when I ask them this question, say community is key. You can't do nothing alone. You got to have first a community, and it's less relevant if you have enough money or preparations, but first is focus on community, because you can help each other. And then from there, build out, food storage, hard assets, gold, silver, guns, goats, and stuff like
guns
that.
And goats. I like that.
God, guns, goats, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But gold,
gold, God, guns, golds. God, guns, goats, and gold. There you go.
I argue that I want to ask you how successful you think they're going to be. And I look at this from the biblical perspective, but also the, if you want, secular perspective for folks who are not Christians. But the Bible says that they ultimately fail. The Tower of Babel failed. Tower of Babel 2.0 is going to fail. Christ will come back, toss a rock, a stone, and it's all going to come tumbling down. So from a biblical perspective, it fails, but we will go through tribulation. From a secular perspective, I recently had on Jacob Nordengard, great Swedish researcher. This is his CD he sent me. I got his books. And he also says, he's not Christian, but from a secular perspective, he doesn't think they can succeed as well, because what they're trying to build is so massive. It's so much hubris. They need such a high amount of maintenance and energy to build out this global AI technocracy. It's just not feasible. So I would agree with him as well from a secular perspective, because you're going to need so much maintenance, so much energy. What they're doing is anti-nature in many ways. Mm-hmm. And so I think ultimately it does fail. But again, some of us might end up jailed in the process, starving to death, killed. Thoughts on sort of that road ahead?
Yeah, I think we have to kind of resolve within ourselves that there are certain things that are beyond our control, and that we're gonna stay true to who we are and our faith and our beliefs, regardless of what may come, and kind of like draw that line in the sand for ourselves. But I think ultimately, like you said, it has to fail, even if it succeeds for a while, just like, communism in the USSR succeeded for 70 years before it finally came crashing down, because it's not a sustainable system. It goes too much against human nature and what we're all about. We want freedom. We want self-determination. being in a top-down society where you're ruled like a slave will never be a good long-term plan. And I think because we become so much more educated, like you said, we demand better psyops. We've become enlightened. So many people have become enlightened. Because of that factor, I think the resistance will be even that much stronger. I think at the same time, we have to recognize that they have a lot of power and that these globalists are ruthless, as we saw with the COVID crisis. I mean, they didn't care that millions of people were going to die or have shorter lives because of what they did with those shots. They don't care. So they have that kind of power, and they have power over the media, at least the mainstream media. Fortunately, the alternative media is getting stronger and stronger. And by the way, on my website, you can see this neat little mug here. That's the alternative media, and on this side is the BS media. But the alternative media is growing stronger and stronger. People's eyes are being opened just through podcasts like this one and thousands of others. It's getting to that tipping point, and so the pushback is going to be harder and harder, more and more to overcome. So if they succeed, I don't think they're going to succeed for long. A handful of years maybe, but the pushback will be intense, I think.
That's the good news. There you are, folks. There is your white pill. And my attitude in general, though, I've cited Imran Khan. Let me see if I can pull up that quote again. It's so good. Here it is. Imran Khan, who's now in jail because he's been fighting the globalists. This is from 2010. He says, "If victory is certain, even a coward will fight. But real bravery is when one dares to fight when defeat is certain." And I think for me, that attitude is a white pill. Like we've seen visualize the film 300, right? Sparta, where it's David versus Goliath, and David in that case loses. But just having that attitude of going into battle without fear, calculating the cost. And yes, I might suffer in different ways, right? But just having this spirit of, I think, being content, a disposition that's joyful and content, no matter what happens. That's for me kind of like a white pill. And whatever will happen, and we don't know each day how the turn of events will go on. So, any then other thought or final thought for us?
Well, I guess if we really want to go super big picture here and super biblical 30,000 foot view, so to speak, I mean, we know from the book of Revelation that there will be a one world government where no one can buy or sell without the mark of the beast. And that seems like it's very, very close. But we all know that in the end, Christ wins, and the evil is overcome. And I believe what's on the other side of this is the actual establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. Where the lion lays down with the lamb, where the fulfillment of "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven" happens. Christians have been praying that prayer for a couple thousand years. And that is actually going to occur. The kingdom of God, I believe, will be established on earth, and it'll be a kingdom of justice and righteousness and joy. And I think that's what we have to look forward to. It's like the birth pangs. The birth pangs get worse right before the birth, but then once the birth comes, you forget all about the pain. And I think we have to be brave. I mean, we were picked for this time, is my belief. There's no mistakes with God. We were born into this for a reason, and so we need to take up the challenge and rise to the occasion, and put our big boy pants on, so to speak, and live for the truth and not back down. In the beginning of the book, there's a dedication there. Let me pull it up here. Yes, right here. So the dedication in the book is to those who speak the truth at great personal cost, and to all who face evil unflinchingly. You are my inspiration. So that's my goal, is to face it unflinchingly, spread the word, open people's eyes. Hopefully get the book at globalcollapsebook.com, share it with others, share it with as many people as you can, get the word out. It's just my little way, my little contribution. But I think I was shown those 11 collapse points for a reason. And I think it's an easy concept to get your mind around. So I hope people go there and take advantage of it.
White pills all around. Yeah. And I didn't know you had I just noticed the mug for sale as well. That is very cool. And yeah, the website, again, globalcollapsebook.com, linked in the description, the Globalist Plan to collapse everything to usher in a new world order. There's also links there to your X account, I think Instagram, and Rumble. So really good stuff. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much. My pleasure. Maybe we can do it again sometime.